So this week in the text, you were assigned to read about managing collaborative teams or students working collaboratively together in group situations. So I really wanted to talk about how that collaborative learning has evolved into something much more rigorous at the secondary level, including and really even at the elementary level as well. Schools and districts and administrators and teachers are starting to use a model or approach known as project-based learning. And so that's going to be the topic of this talk, as well as some videos that you're going to watch in class for this online class session. But I wanted to start off with just kind of an overview of why we do project-based learning, sort of what it is, and then you'll learn even more about this through the videos that you're going to watch for this part of the online session. So to begin, I think something that's really important to have your students bring in with them when they're participating in a PBL lesson is creativity. Creativity is something that you can't teach. Kids have to practice it. Everyone can be creative if allowed, first of all, if they're motivated to be creative, but also if they're given a chance to sort of practice that creative skill. So we're going to watch a video by the name of a gentleman, Ken Robinson, and I think you'll really enjoy his video. It's on. He's actually somebody that he writes books, he does different things regarding transforming schools. So this video is all about this creativity that we should be using in schools, and he likes to refer to this as divergent thinking.
Divergent thinking. Published a couple of years ago. Divergent thinking isn't the same thing as creativity. I define creativity as the process of having original ideas that have value. Divergent thinking isn't a synonym, but it's an essential capacity for creativity. It's the ability to see lots of possible answers to a question, lots of possible ways of interpreting a question, to think what Edward de Bono would probably call laterally, to think not just in linear or convergent ways, to see multiple answers, not one. So, I mean, there are tests for this. I mean, one kind of cod example would be people might be asked to say, how many uses can you think of for a paperclip? One of those routine questions. Most people might come up with 10 or 15. People who are good at this might come up with 200. And they do that by saying, well, could the paperclip be 200 foot tall and be made out of foam rubber? You know, like, does it have to be a paperclip as we know it, Jim? You know. Now, there are tests for this, and they gave them to 1,500 people in a book called Breakpoint and Beyond. And on the protocol of the test, if you scored above a certain level, you'd be considered to be a genius at divergent thinking. Okay? So my question to you is, what percentage of the people tested, of the 1,500, scored at genius level for divergent thinking? Now, you need to know one more thing about them. These were kindergarten children. So what do you think? What percentage at genius level? 80. 80, okay. 98%. Now, the thing about this was it was a longitudinal study. So they retested the same children 5 years later, ages of 8 to 10. What do you think? 15? They retested them again 5 years later, ages 13 to 15. You can see a trend here, can't you? Now, this tells an interesting story, because you could have imagined it going the other way, couldn't you? You start off not being very good, but you get better as you get older. But this shows two things. One is we all have this capacity, and two, it mostly deteriorates. Now, a lot of things have happened to these kids as they've grown up, a lot. But one of the most important things that happened to them, I'm convinced, is that by now they've become educated. You know, they've spent 10 years at school being told there's one answer, it's at the back. And don't look. And don't copy, because that's cheating. I mean, outside schools, that's called collaboration, you know, but inside schools. Now, this isn't because teachers want it this way, it's just because it happens that way. It's because it's in the gene pool of education. We have to think differently about human capacity. We have to get over this old conception of academic, non-academic, abstract, theoretical, vocational, and see it for what it is, a myth. Secondly, we have to recognize that most great learning happens in groups, that collaboration is the stuff of growth. atomize people and separate them and judge them separately, we form a kind of disjunction between them and their natural learning environment. And thirdly, it's crucially about the culture of our institutions, the habits of the institution and the habitats that they occupy.
So it's really important that we kind of get away from that old traditional model and allow students the opportunity to work together in groups. You heard him discuss collaboration and why that's so important. And so moving on here, I really just wanted to focus on this project-based learning, and you can see in the box in blue here that students work in groups seeking multiple sources of information, and they create authentic products. And so students really take ownership in this because they feel as though what they're doing has value, and it also takes the content that they've learned in class and it applies it to real life situations. So why is it important to do project-based learning? So any of you that have had Ed Psych, which I believe all of you have, can probably see familiarity in this triangle here. This is the Bloom's taxonomy, kind of those different layers or levels of learning that take place. And so normally though, you've probably seen it differently where they kind of like all stack on top of each other. And in this model, you can see where we have 3 here on the bottom, which is really what takes place in a traditional educational setting. So we're teaching the students content and we want them to remember this and be able to explain it and discuss it. And then we want them to take that information and apply that to real life situations. And so this is where we tended 15 years ago to really be making sure that students were able to apply that information. And we called that higher order thinking, is what we called that 15 years ago. Well, now we're asking that students really, to add more rigor to our curriculum, we're asking that students be able to create things, really truly evaluate and defend their answers with the information that they've learned, and then analyze and be able to examine what they're learning and really sort of base judgments and be able to transfer the information into an unknown setting and things like this. So this is really where education needs to move. So I like to put these all kind of on this equal level because I think these are all equally important and these are all things that we should strive to do in our classes with our students. Another reason we do PBL is because we want to incorporate those 21st century skills, and that's kind of a buzzword right now, but those 21st century skills of creativity, innovation, problem solving, making decisions, inspiring, coming up with ideas, all of these different things that really employers are demanding in the workforce. So it's really important that our students have the opportunity, if they have to do this after they graduate, that they need to have the opportunity to do this in the classroom when they're with us. And the other reason, as you heard in the video, collaboration is really important. It's kind of that old adage that 2 heads are better than 1. Well, really, you get 3, 4, 5, 6 heads together and you come up with these amazing, wonderful ideas. So we really need to make sure that we're doing that with our students as much as possible. The other reason that I personally love project-based learning, and research shows that this improves students' content knowledge, is to integrate the different curricular areas. And really this is what happens in real life. We don't just learn science independently of all these other content areas. Same thing with social studies or math. All of these things sort of work together in the real life situation. So it's really important that we do that with our students within the classroom as well. So a lot of project-based learning lessons that you see actually integrate several content areas, and I think that's when they're most rigorous and most effective, and students can really also see the relevance in that as well. So kind of summing up there, it's really important to do project-based learning, first of all, because we have those 21st century skills. It's really this in-depth sort of inquiry process that's occurring. The upper 3 levels on Bloom's taxonomy that we talked about, but also because it allows students are forced to actually understand quite a significant amount of content. They also have the opportunity for voice and choice. So in other words, they get to express how they feel about the content, but they also get to choose how they want to solve the problem, which I think allows students to really take ownership. And also, project-based learning really leans allows students to understand what they need to know in order to be literate citizens in the future. So we're going to watch this short video on why project-based learning is so important.
I run the Washington Post. I ran for president.
I lobby Congress.
We had one student in my former district who dropped out of high school and came to AP government every day till the end of the year. And he called himself the worst dropout in the history of dropouts because he still showed up. I don't know why he came, but I do. I do know why, because there was a role for him, and he played a part in the classroom learning experience. For him to drop out of high school, but still to come to that class, that was the moment in that first year that changed the way I thought about the course.
What we're working on in the Knowledge and Action project is a way of making advanced high school coursework accessible to more and more children and worth it by making it a deep, rich curriculum that they can take with them into the future.
Do we want to say before or against the Alabama law?
Our interest group would be before this, for the Alabama, because all it is collecting data.
It's hard to collect data when people are not forthcoming. It makes it really hard to get accurate data.
The way we attempt to achieve deep conceptual learning is primarily through a particular kind of rigorous project-based learning. It's not uncommon in an AP course to have a project or two. We're trying to drive the course through projects, which is to say through experiential learning.
2,000 students stop going to school. Alabama's school system is going to fall apart because there's not going to be government funding.
2,000 students in a state that probably has, 10, 13 million, somewhere in there?
How many of those 13 million go to school?
Well, AP Gov is a class that has traditionally been taught in one semester. So in one semester, they fly through all the institutions of government, as well as how they're linked together and how they're linked to the people. And it has traditionally been a very lecture-oriented course because it's a lot of content to get through and not a whole lot of time. The idea came of, well, could we make an entire course in government that really is about how we put kids in the middle of these situations and not how we just tell kids about these situations.
These people that are here legally, if they're here legally, if we make it possible for them to get a green card, they'll then in turn be paying taxes, they'll be benefiting our society instead of hurting it.
I came on board after the AP US Government and Politics course was in place, and the team wanted to add a second course, AP Environmental Science.
So 1% or 1%.
Only 4 of them were blue.
Everybody understands, all of these brilliant, hardworking teachers that teach AP know that what they need to deliver is a large proportion of their students passing that test. So the most direct route to doing that is to teach the test. Well, what we're trying to do is figure out a way to drive more learning into that course. So in our courses, students are very often involved in a simulation. In the case of the AP Gov course, they're taking the role of a Supreme Court justice or somebody running a campaign or running for office.
Okay, so this concludes the first part of this lecture. If you'll watch the second part.